Crashing on a colony world is not something anybody wants to do. Crashing on the far side of the planet from the only colony on that said planet more than just sucks. This is what happened to the crew of the Lovely Angels after taking care of a few pirates. Though they had killed the pirates, they had not gotten away unscathed as the ship tumbles through the atmosphere. The helmsman is able to keep a little control as all the systems begin to overload and short out. Though some quick thinking, he was able to dodge a few mountains and hills before crashing into the southern ice cap. The ship slid across the terrain with vigor as the terrain removed almost all friction. This meant that they were going to strike something very soon. The starboard side of the ship hit a small block of ice, and the ship began to spin wildly, causing the damaged parts of the ship to rip apart even more than they already were. Eventually, they crashed into a large snowbank that forced everyone to be thrown against the side of the ship as they went from 88 miles an hour to 0 in an instant. Calling out for a status on the crew, they had, in fact, lost a few. Now, the crew of 19 is now 7. Along with that, all the communications equipment is completely and utterly toast. The crew are called together, and the captain states to the crew that they will simply stand by for rescue. That is when the human named John spoke up. "Are you insane?" The captain, trying to remain more professional. "You dare insult your captain? You had better bring forth an intelligent reason for your outburst." "If we remain here, we're all dead." "Impossible. We have plenty of provisions. We sent out a distress beacon." "You sent it out too late. All the systems on the ship were already frying, and you refused to install the deployable beacon like I requested." "Even if it takes a little longer for the rescue to find us, it is no time to panic." "Who's panicking? I'm not panicking. Are you panicking?" "No, this is simple Arctic survival." At that point, a few of the crew began to stare at him, as everyone knows humans live in a much more temperate climate. Realizing he has an audience, he continues. "We are currently running on backup power, which should give us power for about 300 hours. Or it would have if a few of the power cells didn't get damaged in the fight. Once they fade, this ship, this metal ship," he knocks on the side of the wall to make his point, "will turn this ship into a frozen storage locker. When that happens, everybody on board has about 3 hours before they turn into a meat popsicle." An avian crew member from a species known as the called Bink asks, "What other options do we have?" "We load up with as many supplies as possible and we get to a warmer climate." "I would have to authorize it. As the captain of this ship, your ship is barely functional enough for us to even have this conversation. I would be amazed if she was ever going to fly again. Though I am grateful to this ship and its crew for getting us this far, the only way to survive now is through knowledge, training, and grit." "And what type of knowledge could a human have? We know you came from a death world, but your people remain in the temperate regions. What type of training could you have from a species that does not live in such climates? No one would question your grit as we understand humans. And you also seemed quite determined. But tell me, human, what knowledge and training could you possess?" Trying to calm himself down before he continues, John says, "Basic survival skills are required for any functional human living in rural areas. You never know what you're going to encounter. This is also something called survival camping, which is a common recreation on Earth where you are out in nature with minimal supplies, if any, and have to survive on your knowledge and tenacity." He looks around the room at the different species. "Now, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get everything I'm going to require to get out of the cargo hold and load it up with as much supplies as it can carry, and I'm going to leave and head north. You cannot just take from my ship. What happens when the rescue ships arrive while you are out away doing that? Tell them the direction and bill me for the supplies. He then turns and walks away. For the next 50 hours, John goes through the ship's manifest and gets everything that he needs. The ship was going to deliver to multiple planets, so there was everything that he was going to need as far as required. Plenty of bags for supplies, and of course a temporary shelter, which he was grateful to have. A plethora of blankets, winter coats, boots, and even a repulsor lift cart that he could use basically as a pulk. While he's getting prepared to head out, three others decide to join him. Bink, the avian male from before, Lauchi, an aquatic female, and Kib, a reptilian male. John found it odd that the only remaining female on the ship wanted to travel with him. He tried not to think about it too much, but in the back of his mind, he figured that she had a better chance of not being turned into a baseball if they were traveling. Checking what each one would carry, it was clear that John would be the one performing most of the heavy lifting. Being the only mammalian, his musculature and skeletal structure is far denser than the others. Thankfully, now there's four of them, they had four pulks. And these, of course, would be in the form of repulsor lift carts, so they could drag a whole lot more supplies. Looking at each of them, Bink only needed minimal attire, less than John did, as Bink's feathers were just as insulated as a down coat. Actually, as he looked, it seemed as though it worked a whole lot better. Lauchi didn't really require any additional covering outside of a scarf, as her body was already used to cold environments, though John still insisted that she wear something. The issue is Kib. His reptilian biology meant that he required a complete environmental suit. These suits are a little on the bulky side, yet are such a wonderful piece of equipment. Any species can use them, and everything from temperature to humidity can be preset. The suit also allows for Kib to carry even more supplies on his back, heavier loads than what he could if it was just him. John made sure to get a full layout inventory before leaving. Many of the crew staying would ask him, "Why would you need that?" John would answer these questions for a while, but got so frustrated with them as he kept losing time answering these questions, he would eventually answer, "Don't worry about it." The night before heading out, John insisted that all four sleep in the cargo hold with their gear they were going to be taking. As John curled up with his back against the door, the others asked, "Why would you do that?" John answers, "Don't worry about it. Just get some sleep." They all woke up to the sound of the door opening and John falling backwards, and the captain, with the rest of the command staff, begging John not to shoot him, as John had already drawn his pistol and was pointing it right at the base of the captain's head. As the three were shuffled awake, they asked what was going on. John yelled at how the captain was going to sabotage the group, and failing that, they would just have them killed. The captain denied it, of course, but his presence is enough to convince the group of the captain's intentions. As they went back and forth a bit, Lauchi actually hid behind Kib and Bink as the command crew's eyes kept drifting onto her. That is when Lauchi screamed out, "They were probably planning on forcing a mating on me and blaming you." This did not calm the situation down. No, not in the slightest. John stared into the cat-like eyes of the captain and stood silent as the captain looked down the barrel of his 45, eventually realizing that going into the cargo hold was just a bad idea. The captain then ordered the staff to withdraw, and they slowly did. When the doors closed, Kib scurried over and began tampering with the door controls. A few moments and a shower of sparks later, Kib just said, "That should keep them out." John finally lowered his pistol, turned to the others, and said, "Looks like break time's over. Time to leave." Everyone in the group double checked everything and then had to help Kib with his suit. The suit, once complete, sized itself to his body, and this even included wrapping around the tail, in which Kib moved around a little bit just to make sure he had full range of motion. With everything ready, they stood at the cargo door. Only one door still operated, and the sounds of screeching metal filled the room as it did. Once it opened far enough, the mixture of 4 different species walked into the Antarctic air. The wind blew mildly as they went into the blinding white of the snow. With John in the front, he looked odd as every part of his body was covered with puffy clothing. The only thing not covered in fabric was the dark lenses he had in front of his eyes. Clearing the ship, he pulls something out of his pocket, looks at it, and turns slightly before heading in that direction. Behind him is Bink, with layers over his feathers to simply stop the wind and not much else. The boots he wore didn't seem right when he first looked, as though they might not be made for his talon feet, but they were in fact the correct ones for his species. They lucked out big time getting them. He also wore something over his eyes he didn't enjoy wearing. Yet he would not say anything to John, as John had told him about their need for protection. Bink wasn't going to argue. Next was Lotchie, with hardly any outer protection worn at all. Her aquatic genetics are as such that she only needs footwear, a single layer of clothing, and that's it. For her, this was actually a lot of clothing, as her species did not wear much due to living most of their lives underwater. One area that required cover was actually her gills. If they start to freeze, she is in very, very deep trouble. Along with covering her head was some more eye protection. When she first protested about wearing them, John said, "I'm not asking." Bringing up the rear is Kib in his suit. He did not require any additional protection as his suit covered the entire body. The faceplate even polarized to cover his eyes to protect them. The remainder of the crew watched as they slowly walked off, dragging the repulsor carts behind them full of supplies. Some said prayers for the group, while others cursed the group for being reckless, but most just watched silently, thinking that, unlike those on the ship, the group would not have enough food to make it. The captain was upset that a lowly human had defied his authority, but was happy that the human and his entourage are now gone as he hits the button for the cargo bay doors. Outside, John and the rest of the group keep their eyes forward as they hear the mechanism for the doors struggle. In spite of not actually being cold thanks to being wrapped up so well, when the cargo doors shut with a final bang of the metal, John could only think one thing. It's like hearing a tomb seal itself. For the next 70 hours, the group walked in relative silence, pushing as far as they can, passing hills and crossing a saddle. They didn't stop until Lotchie falls to her knees. Kib yells that they have to stop, and John goes to see if she's still alive. She is, but just exhausted. John starts to unpack the shelter with Kib and Bink. Lotchie tries to help, but John insists that she rest. It doesn't take long to set up the shelter, power down the carts, and get inside. The shelter is actually only designed for 2, but they make it work with 4. As John kept saying, "There's always room for one more." To accomplish this, they actually had to double up on the cots. Lauchi was with Bink, as his feathers will keep her just a little bit more warm, as all he had to do was basically fan his feathers out and he'd be fine for the night. John and Kib were back to back, as Kib was fine inside his suit, but John was covered up by multiple blankets and also slept on others. As he laid down, John said, "Sleep fast, everybody." Bink chimed in, "Is this what the trip will be like? Just walking until we cannot take another step?" "Until we reach the trees. Then what happens?" "I'll tell you when we get there. Now, go to sleep. You're gonna need it."